in the humid subtropical forests of eastern China, long before the invention of writing, farming, or civilization, a robust hominin once walked the ancient terrain. Known today as Hexian Man, this fossil individual has puzzled anthropologists for decades. Discovered in the Longtan cave of Hexian County, Anhui Province, the remains are notable for their archaic features, their unusually robust mandible, and their surprisingly late date. These fossils may represent one of the last echoes of an ancient lineage of humans in East Asia, a lineage with connections to Peking Man, Java Man, and possibly the mysterious Denisovans. Hexian Man is not just a skull or a jawbone or a few molars. It is a tantalizing piece of a larger puzzle that complicates our understanding of early human evolution in East Asia. The question that has long haunted paleo-anthropologists is this: who was Hexian Man, and how does he fit into the larger story of human evolution? The Hexian fossils were discovered during a routine excavation of Longtan cave. This cave, formed within limestone hills surrounded by thick vegetation and river systems, had long attracted the interest of local geologists and paleontologists due to the high frequency of Pleistocene-era faunal remains. Among the discoveries were fossilized bones of extinct deer, ancient elephants, and the unmistakable bones of archaic humans. The site was the deposit of the Cambrian limestone cave where 2 excavations were carried out. Discoveries included a human fossil skull, a section of a mandible, a top bone, an upper frontal bone, 11 molars, and a frontal tooth. It was concluded that the fossils belonged to at least 3 men, and the skull belonged to a young male who exhibited many typical features of Homo erectus. The skull of the Hexian Man is generally similar to that of the Peking Man, but a little more advanced. This suggests that Hexian Man lived in the period of the late Peking Man era. The endocranial volume for Hexian Man is approximately 1,025 cubic centimeters based on the endocast water displacement method, far inferior to the average European. Such a small brain suggests a creature incapable of higher levels of reasoning, though it must have had some base instinct, enough for survival in the wilds. The hominin remains included a partial skull, a complete mandible, several teeth, and some postcranial fragments. From the beginning, it was clear that these remains were unusual. Radiometric dating and faunal correlation placed the fossils at around 300,000 years old, though some estimates have proposed an age as recent as 150,000 years. Even the most conservative estimates suggest Hexian Man lived significantly later than his closest morphological cousins in Africa or Europe, and even later than the more famous Peking Man of the Zhoukoudian caves. The Hexian cranium, though fragmentary, preserves several key anatomical features that allow comparisons with other populations. Like other East Asian specimens, the skull exhibits a thick cranial vault and a low, receding forehead. The brow ridges are heavy and continuous, a classic feature of early hominins. The postorbital constriction, the narrowing of the skull just behind the eye sockets, is pronounced, indicating a smaller frontal lobe compared to modern humans. One of the most striking aspects of the Hexian cranium is its vault thickness. At certain points, the cranial bone is nearly twice as thick as that found in modern humans. This pattern of hyper-robust cranial bone is shared with Peking Man and some Indonesian Homo erectus, such as those from Sangiran and Trinil. However, Hexian Man appears even more archaic than Peking Man in several respects. The cranial base, for instance, appears less flexed, a trait more typical of early humans. Though the face is not well preserved, the evidence suggests that Hexian Man had a large, projecting midface and a flat nasal bridge. These traits are consistent with the robust, cold-adapted morphology found in other archaic Homo specimens across Eurasia. If there is one part of the Hexian fossil assemblage that demands attention, it is the mandible. This lower jaw is an extraordinary piece of human anatomy, massive, thick, and seemingly overbuilt. In fact, some researchers have called it one of the most robust Homo erectus mandibles ever found in East Asia. The mandibular corpus, the horizontal part of the jaw, is extremely deep, and the bone is thick along its entire length. The symphysis, or the point at which the 2 halves of the jaw fuse in the front, lacks a true chin, a classic Homo erectus trait, but it is particularly thick and buttressed. The ascending ramus, which connects the jaw to the skull, is broad and angled, providing a large surface for the attachment of chewing muscles. One possible explanation for this extreme robustness is dietary. Hexian Man may have consumed a diet that included hard, fibrous foods, nuts, seeds, and uncooked roots, that required powerful mastication. Alternatively, the mandible may represent a localized adaptation or even genetic drift in an isolated population that retained ancient features long after they disappeared in other regions. The Hexian dental assemblage is equally fascinating. The teeth are large and exhibit a number of archaic features, but they also hint at evolutionary transitions. The molars are massive and have multiple roots with broad occlusal surfaces, the top part of the tooth used for grinding. The enamel is thick, a trait often associated with a diet that includes coarse materials. Interestingly, the third molars, the wisdom teeth, are not reduced, unlike in modern humans, and in some individuals they appear to be as large or larger than the first molars, a reversal of the trend seen in more recent human species. The incisors are large and shovel-shaped, with pronounced ridges on the lingual, tongue-facing surface. This shoveling is a well-known trait of East Asian populations and appears even in some modern humans in the region. Some researchers have argued that this trait represents genetic continuity from ancient populations like Hexian Man all the way to present-day East Asians. Furthermore, wear patterns on the teeth suggest a high degree of occlusal stress, perhaps from chewing hard foods or using the teeth as tools. Such wear is common in archaic humans and reflects their demanding lifestyle. Dating Hexian Man has proven difficult. Initial estimates based on associated fauna suggested an age of 300,000 years. Later estimates based on uranium series dating of the cave formations hinted at a more recent age, possibly as young as 150,000 years. This range places Hexian Man significantly later than Homo erectus finds, like those at Trinil in Java, but still older than classic Neanderthals and modern Homo sapiens. This late survival of archaic traits in East Asia has led to renewed debates about the evolutionary trajectory of humans in the region. Was Hexian Man a direct descendant of earlier Homo erectus populations, or was he part of a distinct parallel lineage that survived in isolation while modern humans were evolving elsewhere? Hexian Man is often compared to Peking Man, Homo erectus pekinensis, whose remains were discovered at Zhoukoudian near Beijing. Both show the characteristic features of East Asian Homo erectus: thick cranial vaults, heavy brow ridges, and large teeth. However, some scholars believe Hexian Man is even more primitive in certain respects. The more archaic cranial base, thicker mandibular bone, and certain dental traits suggest that Hexian Man may have retained features that had already begun to disappear in the population at Zhoukoudian. Even more intriguing is the comparison to the Penghu jawbone, a fossil mandible dredged up by fishermen from the seabed near Taiwan and dated to somewhere between 190,000 and 50,000 years ago. The Penghu mandible is massive, thick-boned, and completely lacking a chin, much like Hexian Man's jaw. Some have argued that Hexian and Penghu represent a late surviving population of archaic humans that lingered in East and Southeast Asia long after Homo erectus had disappeared elsewhere. Still others suggest that these fossils could be Denisovan. Although no DNA has been recovered from either Hexian or Penghu, their morphology, particularly the robust jaws and massive molars, shares similarities with the Denisovan mandible from Xiahe Cave in the Tibetan Plateau. The Xiahe jaw, discovered in Baixia Karst Cave, has been genetically confirmed as Denisovan and shows a similar pattern of large teeth and deep jawbone. Could Hexian Man represent a Denisovan, a hybrid, or at least a close relative? The overlap in time, geography, and physical traits between these fossils suggest that multiple hominin groups may have coexisted in East Asia during the Middle Pleistocene. Homo erectus, Denisovans, and perhaps others we have yet to identify. To understand Hexian Man, we must also understand the world he lived in. The region around Hexian in eastern China lies in the Yangtze River Basin, an area that was, and still is, marked by wetlands, karst limestone caves, and dense subtropical forests. During the Middle Pleistocene, the climate in this region was alternately warm and humid or cold and dry, depending on glacial cycles. but overall the area was hospitable, teeming with life, and rich in natural resources. Fossil remains found alongside Hexian Man include a wide range of fauna: ancient elephants, deer, rhinoceroses, pigs, and even crocodiles. This suggests a mosaic of forested and open environments, perhaps with rivers and lakes that supported diverse plant and animal life. The flora of this region is a variable Garden of Eden, with many wild fruits and plants, which would have made life here easier compared to the plains of Africa or the frozen tundra of Europe and Central Eurasia. The presence of stone tools at the site indicates that Hexian Man was a tool user, though the toolkit appears relatively simple, consisting mostly of flakes and choppers made from locally available quartzite. The use of implements is a mark of man's dominion over nature, a gift not bestowed on earlier forms of ape men. Peking Man seemed to experiment with drilling holes for some reason, had an interest in clothing, a trait which Hexian Man also likely shared. What is clear is that Hexian Man occupied a fertile region that could support small populations of hunter-gatherers. The surrounding limestone caves offered shelter, while the abundant flora and fauna provided food. These conditions may have allowed isolated populations of archaic humans to persist for far longer in East Asia than they did in Africa or Europe. Hexian Man remains an enigma. He is clearly a member of the Homo erectus family, yet he is too late, too robust, and too isolated to fit neatly into the textbook version of human evolution. His mandible and molars rival those of Denisovans, his skull recalls the massive brows of Peking Man, and his survival, until the cusp of the late Pleistocene, raises unsettling questions. Did Hexian Man represent a separate evolutionary experiment, a lineage that never went extinct, but was eventually absorbed into the gene pool of later Homo sapiens? Or was he a Denisovan in disguise, his identity hidden only because his bones were too old to yield DNA? And most importantly, how many other Hexian men are out there, buried in caves across Asia, waiting to rewrite our understanding of who we are and where we come from? The answers to these questions remain locked in bone and stone, but as more fossils are uncovered, and as ancient DNA technology advances, Hexian Man may yet reveal the secrets of his ancient world, a world where multiple human species walked side by side, each following their own path through the shadowy forests of deep time. Thank you for watching and commenting, and please subscribe for more content.